the first ceremony, so you do this twice over 3 days, right?
Yeah.
So this is the first night, first ceremony. I'm doing a lot of like setting intentions, writing a lot of, you're writing a lot of notes. I journaled the whole thing that I showed you earlier, right? And you're trying to set these intentions, and you're trying to sort of understand what you're trying to achieve from it. I did a lot of writing, and yeah, and I think I settled on the intention. My intention was to love myself, because you could come back and it's like, oh, I want to fix things with my dad or relationships and stuff. And there was a lot of obviously that kind of thought process, as you can imagine. But ultimately, it really came down to I wanted to love myself. And yeah, so that was the intention. And as you start with that, there's a lot of meditation going on. And then when it's your turn to take the ayahuasca, what they do is there's two things they give you. Number one is they actually blow this tobacco dust up your nose. Yeah. And basically it's this pipe, and they stick it up that nose and that nose, and it makes your eyes stream. It's painful. It was like, what is this? And you're trying to do your best to like take it, but you've never experienced this in your life. You're obviously like shitting your pants a bit as well, because like this is like wild. Like I'm on the other side of the world.
Metaphorically, right? Because people do actually shit their pants on ayahuasca, but you're talking about metaphorically. Right?
Metaphorically, in this
just
case,
to confirm.
Yeah, this time, no, but yeah, metaphorically scared, right? I was petrified, but at the same time, like, the courage was there. I was being courageous. So, and then they give you this thing. It looks like a dirty shot of Jägermeister.
It tastes a lot worse than Jägermeister.
It tastes a lot worse than Jägermeister, yeah. So you take that, and then, you're just sitting there meditating, and there's like all these candles around everywhere, and, and nothing's really happening for like 40 minutes or so. And Jake goes up and he asks for another dose. So then, like, yeah, I'm gonna have another dose kind of thing, the ego kicking in there. And then and then that's when things started to get interesting. So it was all kind of like wavy and that kind of thing. But what happened is I was standing outside, and you purge a lot, right? So I started throwing up in the bucket, and I was basically, I had to come inside, and it was all very dizzying. And then basically I was throwing up more and more and purging more and more. And essentially, it started getting really, really, really mad. Like, you had all these, like, when you're purging, what they do is they have these, like these fans of leaves and like this, like sage incensey type stuff. And the shaman's going, stuff like that. But what was to me feels like the smoke. It felt like these hands were all over me, these like very comforting feminine hands, which is referred to as like Mother Ayahuasca, right? Because there's a lot of, it's all about like feminine energies, masculine and feminine energies, as I'm sure you're aware. So yeah, there was a lot of that, and it felt like all these hands are over me. So it was very, very terrifying. But what was this feminine energy? It was like, you're being looked after, and it was kind of like taking me on into this new plane. And what happened was like, I basically went into this world where like I was kind of like a bit like a Patronus in Harry Potter. You remember those things? Have you seen that? And you could see how the whole world was like connected, and all in this kind of like spiritually way. It was like this whole like mind-blowing experience where you could see how everything and anything was connected, time and space and all that kind of stuff. And it was so overwhelming that I kind of like was like, oh my God, how am I ever gonna like come back from this kind of situation? Because it was so unbelievable. And then I kind of hid, right? So I was like, wrapped myself up in this blanket, and it got really tough, and I went into this void. And then I started screaming out for my dad. So dad passed away 10 years ago now, or so, 8-9 years ago. Anyway, so apparently I was screaming out for my dad like a little 3-year-old boy. I was going like, "Daddy, daddy, daddy, where are you? Where are you?" And, I was crying out for him, like wailing. And yeah, that was obviously very, very intense, as you can imagine. But it was almost at the same time, it was like I was allowed to. I was allowed to grieve for something that was obviously the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And yeah, that allowed. I ended up having a conversation with my dad in this trip, and I was able to say the things that I couldn't have said to him when he passed away. I told him that I was going to look after my mum and my sisters. And yeah, it allowed me to kind of grieve, right? Like truly grieve and accept the fact my dad had gone. And that was a difficult relationship I had. It was love, but it was complex. And he's the man I idolized the most, and he was taken from us too early, right? So I was able to do that. And then as I came out of what was this kind of like purgatory, heaven-like place, I wake up and I've come out of my cocoon and I breathe and I go, and it was like I'd just been reborn, right? Like I'd just been born again. And it felt like I had died and come back to life. Like, I guess this is what they call an ego death, is what had happened, you know? And I was in part of this. It was almost like what was going around me. I saw Bruno, and before he'd mentioned, he's like, when you come out of it, you'll either see me as the angel or the devil. Because you know that shame and this stuff, it's the good and the bad, right? Is it. You know, there is no light without a shadow. And all these things he's saying are starting to come really poignant, because you can see it when you're under the influence of the ayahuasca, right? And, you know, and you start to really get the yin and the yang, or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I saw him and I was like, oh, hello, nice to meet you. And I chose to see him as I remember actively choosing to see him as the angel, which was an interesting one. But he was there, and you know, sort of quiet conversations and stuff, but you're still like really floaty and very trippy and stuff. And yeah, I felt like I was like part of this new world of sorts, and it was almost like welcome to the club type feeling, but you've still got a long way to go. That was kind of like this thing. I'm not sure whose club, but that was the feeling, right? And then, you know, then the effects really start wearing off. And I have to say, I felt like a whole weight of the world had just been lifted off me. Like I'd done 30 years of therapy. Right? I had to face, I suppose, in looking at it, like that's why they say it's like 30 years, because therapy is addressing the issues, right? And this is the same kind of process, but so intense. You cannot avoid. I could not avoid the thing that was clearly the most painful thing that I, you know, wasn't addressing in the same way, which was losing the death of my father. Brutal, but necessary.